Scientific literacy to India. Translating some biologic terms into Sanskrit. This is a spin-off to the previous one where I translated taxonomic terms. So I mentioned how India has a low literacy rate. I want to increase that, but it's going to be a challenge. Here's the literacy rate map of India. You can see that it's mostly low except for the west coast, and I think that's due to rains. Due to the extra rains, there's a surplus of food, therefore more people can be educated. However, most of India, especially as you go north and east, doesn't have that luxury, except for a small part of northeast India. Here, I'll recount the problem. Science words are understandable to Europeans, though speaking different languages, because they are unified by Latin and Greek, which became lingua franca. A computer is that which computes or thinks. A transmitter is that which transmits or carries. Electrons have to do with electricity. This is difficult for Indians, where English is their second or third language, possibly. Roughly 14% of people in India speak English, though. Due to India being the second largest population country, yet to overtake China to be the first, this makes India as the second highest English-speaking country. It's just a great fact. What's the benefit of coining Sanskrit words? We can expand science to the larger demographic of India and the country of Greater India, as Sanskrit words can be fit into local languages better than English words, and Sanskrit words can be understood by Indian speakers to some degree better than Latin or Greek or English-based words. There are science terms in Sanskrit, for example, microscope is Sukshmadarshini. Some people did the endeavor of coining some of these science words before me. I'm just going to continue that endeavor. A microscope is literally translates as having a small view, and I'm going to make some words on this online Sanskrit dictionary with the link given below. The person who made this has managed to make some words for chemical and physical terms. For example, this person or the people that made this Sanskrit dictionary for spoken Sanskrit gives carbon as angara, meaning coal, and sodium bicarbonate as vikshara dvyangarya, with vikshara meaning sodium and angarya meaning carbonate, from angara meaning coal. So they did our work to an extent. Let's finish it. Most of the words are mine. I will tell you if a word is from a dictionary or another online source. Let's start. Biology, jlvasAstra, knowledge of life, or knowledge of life forms. Let's start with cells. Named for their resemblance to rooms of monasteries, this Greek prefix cyto is used to mean cell, though it actually means hollow cell as in a room, and container. Modern Indian languages already coined their own word for cell, which is koshika or kosha. Sanskrit dictionary gives the term kosha for cell. The word literally denotes a container or a pocket or even a sheet, a metaphorical stuff relating to the material stuff that envelopes the Atman, giving an illusion that our visible qualities are the Atmans. Now, let's dive right in. So if cell is koshika, then what is the nucleus? Well, here we go. Sanskrit dictionary gives it as koshakendra, meaning cell container, cell center. Sanskrit dictionary gives it as koshakendra, meaning cell center. One Telugu kid's picture book showed a picture of nucleus as just kendra. Now, kendra is from via the Indo-Greeks, Greek kentron, meaning center, and is actually related to the English word center. I initially thought koshendra, or Indra of the cells, as the nucleus rules the cell. Rule is in quotation marks. Let's stick to koshakendra or just kendra for nucleus. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. The word mitochondria means threaded granular. However, to the kids of India, they should have a word that gives them an idea of the mitochondria's role in energy making. In energy production is what the mitochondria does, so let's translate it as energy maker. Shakti is energy in Sanskrit. Maker or making is kara, and let's add the ka suffix because we want it to be diminutive, as the organelle is obviously small. Thus, Shakti Karaka is mitochondria. The cell membrane. We know what cell is in our translation, so let's just translate membrane. In general, a membrane is a thin lining that is a barrier. Let's use words meaning covering that is understandable to the general demographic. A quick look through Google Translate for membrane in Hindi or Punjabi is jili, and thus the Sanskrit original word is jillika. I guess our work is easier, though I do encourage local languages to use their own words as opposed to Sanskrit words. The goal is to make science easier for the larger demographic. The cell wall, unique to plant cells and fungi and protists. Wall in Sanskrit is bitti, veshta or veshtaka. I suggest both to be interchangeable. Dashkosha bitti or kosha veshtaka. But then again, I suggest the local language to use their word for wall or enclosure for such stuff. The endoplasmic reticulum, rough and smooth, will be translated as ruksha and masrana respectively, though again encourage local languages to use their own words. Now the Google Translate for Hindi has this for endoplasmic reticulum: Antaha pradavyayi jalika. Let's break it down. Antaha means in and is cognate with prefix endo. Pradravyayi means something along the lines of fluid or liquid and corresponds to plasma or plasmic. Jalika is net or a mesh and is interpreted to mean network. The Sanskrit form of the Hindi word for endoplasmic reticulum is Antara Pradravyayi Jala or Antara Pradravyayi Jalika. Lysosome. This is what digests stuff in a cell, like bacteria or waste or toxins. Let's name it after the fact that it digests stuff. The word is pachaka, which, while meaning a cook, can also mean digester, and thus lysosome is a cell digester or kosha pachaka. Golgi Apparatus. The Golgi part is named by its discoverer, by a man named Camillo Golgi. Thus, let's keep the name and figure out how to translate apparatus. Apparatus is a fancy word for machine or mechanism, and thus the Sanskrit word is yantra, which is perfect. Thus, Golgi Apparatus is Golgi Yantraka. Ka is a diminutive suffix. Golgi body was in an online search, shown to be translated as Golgikaya, and thus both are acceptable. The cytoplasm. I was initially very new to Sanskrit, so when I tried to search up a word for meaning plasm, I ended up using the word for ghee, just for the sake of it, so I got kosagrita. I know, salgi, which is weird. Now I know the conventional word for plasm, the one used in Hindi, is pradravya, thus we can call cytoplasm kosha pradravya. The vacuole, from vac, meaning vacant. Actually, vacant is from vac, meaning empty. The Sanskrit word for empty is rikta. You could call it rikta kaksha, meaning little vacant room, rikta kakshaka. Google Translate Hindi has this as riktika, which can work. However, I want to name it after its ability as. However, in Sanskrit, bandara is a storeroom. Thus, kosha bandaraka means little cell storeroom. So both Sanskrit-based words coined are acceptable to me: riktika and kosha bandaraka. Microtubules. These are cell scaffolding. Try saying that. Cell scaffolding. Also believed by brilliant man Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff to be the main place that consciousness is happening as per their orchestrated objective reduction theory. Search it up. The Hindi is Sukshma Nalika. Sukshma means small or minuscule, and Nalika means tube or duct. In Sanskrit, the Sukshma Nalika means small tubes, and therefore microtubule. Nucleolus. Since it's small and located in the nucleus, let's call it small nucleus. Small in Sanskrit is alpa, and then kosha kendra is determined to be nucleus. So, or just kendra is nucleus. Thus, nucleolus is alpa kosha kendra or alpa kendra. The ribosome. These are the things that make proteins. Since these are protein makers, let's name them after that. Now we'll talk about the word for protein later, but for now, the word for protein we'll be using is probujina. I don't know how this word originated, but it's the word used in Hindi and found in the Sanskrit dictionary. The word for small maker is karaka. Thus, ribosome is probujina karaka. Let's talk about DNA and get into nitty-gritty of that. Okay, let's start. Genetic as in hereditary is anuvamsha. The word means according to race or family, or genealogical table or list. This is already an established word in Hindi. Chromosome in Hindi, it is established to be Gunasutra. Thus, the Sanskrit equivalent is also Gunasutra. Chromosome is Gunasutra. Guna means quality, here physical quality, rather than sattva, raja, tama. We're talking about hair, color, eye color, etc. And sutra means string, as chromosomes are DNA strings that have the information that causes physical qualities of people. Again, hair, skin color, etc. What about DNA? Chromosomes are packed DNA, and thus Gunasutra is also an appropriate term, but let's make a separate term to differentiate by chromosome and just regular DNA. Tantri is string. Thus Gunatantrika is DNA with the suffix ika referring to the DNA being small. I mean, it is small. It's actually a long molecule, the longest molecule ever. But it's small relative to us. So, Gunatantrika is DNA. And we shall create a word for deoxyribonucleic acid, which is DNA's full name, but that's for another video. Let's continue with the DNA stuff. Gene. A gene is a section in a chromosome/DNA that contains information for a specific quality such as eye color, pigment, or freckles, etc. Since a gene is part of a chromosome, let's find a word in Sanskrit meaning part. Bhaga, anga. Thus, Gunatantrika bhaga or Gunatantrika anga. The latter flows easily when speaking, both are acceptable. I suggest using bhaga or anga or gunabhaga or gunanga for short, like an abbreviation, but gunatantrika bhaga or gunatantrika anga it is. A gene sequence is anukrama, which in Sanskrit means a sequence. Nucleic acid. Nucleus is kendra, and anything to do with the nucleus is thus kendriya. Acid is amla, which actually means sour. Acids are sour. It's a property of an acid. Although kendra amla could work, kendriya amla is the better option. Thus, nucleic acid is kendriya amla. The 5 nucleic acids: adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine, uracil, with the 5 base pairs. We'll talk about ATP later. Let's talk about the origin of names. Adenine, named by Albert Cosell and et al., as it was isolated in the pancreatic gland. Aden in Greek means gland. Thymine, isolated from the thymus. Guanine, isolated from guano. Guano is a bat or bird poop. Yeah, there, I said it. Don't say that word, kids. It's gonna make your parents mad. Cytosine, let's calc it. It was isolated in the same place as the thymine was isolated, but the name refers to the cell. Cyto equaling cell. Let's calc a word for adenine. So we need a word that means gland or pancreas. Pancreas in Sanskrit is Agnishaya, and gland in Sanskrit is Granthi. The suffix ya means coming from. For example, Shiva, and we get Shaivya meaning coming from or belonging to Shiva according to the Sanskrit dictionary online. So if we use a word derived from Agnishaya, then Agnishaya or Agnishayaya, yeah, that's a bit of a mouthful. when we use granthi, we would get grantiya. And frankly, the last one is better. So adenine will be grantiya. Thymine, from thymus. I had trouble finding a word for thymus in Sanskrit, and I found one word I can't analyze the literal meaning of. Thymus in Sanskrit is said to be urodishta until I can find a better word. This one will do. That's thymine would be along the lines of urodishtya. Guanine from guano, to save you the trouble of inappropriate information. As I want kids to watch this too, I will tell you the word I have calqued. Vilendya. Cytosine, I want a better name, but for now I'll calque it to mean along the lines of from the cell, thus koshya. Uracil, despite the name chemical, was isolated first from yeast, so I will diverge from the English and / Latin name and use a word relating to yeasts. The word yeast in Sanskrit is suramanda, and thus uracil will be suramandya. The plasmid is the circular DNA in bacteria, and bacteria will exchange genetic information via the plasmid with each other bacteria before reproducing. This is to promote genetic diversity. Again, I'm going to recap. Small ring DNA is separate from the larger chromosomal DNA. This small ring DNA is the plasmid. Let's name it for its ring structure. Sorry about the typo. Ring in Sanskrit is vartula, which means circle or round. Ring in Sanskrit is also valaya, which is more narrow in that it means ring or bangle or annular, and this is the word that will be used. Thus we can call the plasmid gunavalaya or gunasutra valaya. Both are acceptable. Macromolecules. Lipids, these are fats like oil and, well, fat like animal fat. Fat in Sanskrit is sneha, which also means greasy, and oil. Lipid is thus sneha. Proteins, meaning roughly primary, as proteins play a dominant role in the body. Apparently in Hindi and the Sanskrit Online Dictionary, protein is thus probujina, and that will be used by me. I do not know the etymology of this word. Nucleic acids, DNA, RNA, ATP, and stuff. I already made a word. Nucleus is established to be kendra, and I also established nucleic acids to be kendriyamla. Carbohydrates, these are sugars, and starch, which is a collection of sugar in chains. Thus we'll use the Sanskrit word for sugar, sharkara. Thus carbohydrates are sharkara. DNA parts. Origin of replication, where DNA polymerase first binds to so replication can proceed. Since this is the start of copying, we will use the following words. Duplication or copying is dvirbhava, and replication is roughly pratikriti. Start or beginning is adi. Thus the origin of replication is dvirbhavadi or pratikriyadi. Both are acceptable. Promoter, this is where transcription starts. Transcription in Sanskrit is lekhanam. Thus promoter is lekhanadi. Operator allows if a transcribing protein is going to bind to DNA or stay off from DNA. Let's use a word relating to allow. Anugna is the root in Sanskrit meaning allower. Thus anugnatar is an allower. Thus anugnatar kabaga is operator. We're good. Enzyme. Enzymes are proteins that alter a reaction by speeding them up or making reactions that don't spontaneously occur. The Hindi gives prakinva, but this relates to yeast and fermentation. Enzymes for any reaction. Vejana is accelerating, with vejita means increased or enhanced. Sanskrit dictionary gives avejana in sense of catalyzing. Since enzymes are particles that catalyze, we will call them avejana kana or avejana for short abbreviation. Kana means particle in Sanskrit. Substrate. If avejanam catalyzing is done to the substrate, then it is avejita kana or the catalyzed particle. The active site is where the avejanam or catalyzing happens, thus it is avejanastana. Polymerase. A polymer is something that has many parts. If ekamsha means one part, then anekamsha is having many parts. Thus, a polymer is anekamshin. A polymerase is an enzyme that makes polymers. DNA adds nucleotide monomers to make a DNA strand, which is a polymer. This polymerase is a polymer enzyme, thus anekamsha vejanakana. DNA is made of nucleotides. These nucleotides are the base or root components of DNA, thus they can be called a dhatu. Thus a nucleotide is gunatantrika dhatu or tantrika dhatu. Tonics. Relative to a solution, another solution can be called hypotonic, hypertonic, or isotonic. Since hypertonic has more solute mixed, it is heavily mixed. Thus, heavy in Sanskrit is guru, mixed is mishrita, thus hypertonic is guru mishrita. Since hypotonic has less solution mixed relatively, it is lightly mixed. Thus, lagu in Sanskrit is light, mixed is mishrita, thus hypotonic is lagu mishrita. Isotonic has the same solute mixed, thus relatively speaking is equally mixed. Thus sama in Sanskrit is equal and mishrita is mixed. Thus isotonic is sama mishrita. Diffusion. In Sanskrit, spreading, extension, or diffusion is prasara. Hindu uses this word, and actually that's where I got it from. Diffusing in the context of going across the cell membrane will be, this is my innovation, prasara samkramana, which means diffusion crossing over. Samkramana means crossing over. If you ever heard of Sankranti, it's when the sun appears to cross over into another constellation. Osmosis is the diffusion of water or any solvent. In Hindi, vilayaka is solvent. This is from Sanskrit vili, meaning to dissolve, and hence Sanskrit verb vilayati, also meaning to dissolve. Thus vilayaka in Sanskrit would mean dissolver and thus solvent. Since osmosis is the diffusion of solvent across a membrane, we should call it vilaya prasara, or specifically vilaya prasara samkramana, as it's diffusing across a membrane. By the way, solute is vilina, literally dissolved. I'm just making up, I made this one up. Actually, this is a word in the Sanskrit dictionary. I'm just repurposing it to mean solute. Receptors and stuff. The receptor binds to a molecule, essentially it grasps it. To grasp in Sanskrit is grihnati. A thing or person that grasps or sees is deemed a grahaka. Grahaka will be used as receptor. And the cell receptor is kosha grahaka, or just grahaka for short. A ligand is the molecule that binds to the receptor. The ligand is essentially the message carrying molecule. Since this particle has a message, quotation marks, please notice, to carry, let's name it after that. In Sanskrit, a message or signal is sandesha. In Sanskrit, kana means particle. Thus a ligand is sandesha kana, or message particle. Electrophoresis. This is the moving of molecules through a gel due to electricity. Since gel has pores, these molecules will move across the gel at different rates. So smaller molecules will be at the front and bigger molecules will be at the back. And when you do it with DNA, you can get patterns, and based on that, you can see who's related to who within limits. Thus, we'll make a word meaning to move by electricity. In Sanskrit, vidyut means lightning, but nowadays it's used to mean electricity. I think the Hindi doesn't is bijali, moving in the sense of causing an object to move. In Sanskrit is chalana. Thus, electrophoresis is vidyut chalana. Transport proteins. These proteins are doors to the cell. Thus, door in Sanskrit is dvara. Protein is probujina. Thus, transport proteins are probujina dvara. Facilitated diffusion in Sanskrit, the word for help is upakara. Thus, facilitated diffusion is upakara prasara samkramana in parentheses, literally facilitated diffusion crossing over. Passive transport, this doesn't require energy, ashakti parivaha. Shakti in Sanskrit is energy, by the way. Active transport requires energy, thus is shakti parivaha. Punnett square on Mendelian genetics. Dominant, pramukha, as used by Hindi. Recessive, the allele hidden by the dominant allele, thus is tirohita. allele. Telugu gives allele as yugma vikalpa, meaning pair of things that are in variety. So I'll honor my mother tongue and call it alleles vikalpa. Homozygous, that which gives same alleles, thus same alleles in Sanskrit is sama vikalpa. The Telugu translator gives it as sama yugmaja. Heterozygous, different alleles, so binna vikalpa, although Telugu translator gives heterozygous as vishama yugmaja. I prefer to use the Sanskrit based word that Telugu uses. Summary. Rafior is Rukshmantara Pradravya Jalika. By the way, Masrana Antara Pradravya Jalika is Rafior. Here's a map of the cell with the Sanskrit names. Here's the overview of DNA with the Sanskrit terminology included. You can pause the video. Here's a plasmid and the parts of a plasmid with the Sanskrit terminology included. Here's the hypertonics and stuff with the Sanskrit included. Diffusion with the Sanskrit terminology present. Receptors with the Sanskrit terminology present. Electrophoresis, Vidyutchalanam, Sanskrit terminology also present in the title. Enzyme and substrate with the Sanskrit present. Diffusion across the membrane with transport proteins also with the Sanskrit present. DNA replication with the Sanskrit terminology being used whenever it can be. DNA base pairs with the Sanskrit terminology. Conclusions. A lot of these works have been coined and some have been just coined by me, and some words coined by me are temporary until it can find a better translation. Until then, Vidya Viveka Tattva.